We are live on Fantasy Football Today, DFS. My name is Sia Najad, and as always, I'm joined by Meg Schaub and Mike McClure. Brian Goodwin, thanks for being in here. If you're in here already, hit the like button. If you're watching us on Twitter, that's great. Maybe jump into the YouTube chat and watch us on YouTube and ask some questions. All right, we have a 10-game slate. It feels like the week ended yesterday, but it was just the Thanksgiving slate.
Yep.
What's really cool, though, is that was a 3-game slate, right, Meg and Mike? And we have a 10-game slate, but we can chop that up with early and late slate, right? And so I do want to point out that the afternoon games, there's 3 of them. So if you enjoyed the 3 games that you had for Thanksgiving, well, you got another 3 games for the afternoon slate, Mike. And I got to give you credit because we did that Thanksgiving show, the 3 of us, and you picked out a lot of winners. I mean, listen, you were on a lot of the guys that really, had the fire emojis, for lack of a better way to say it. So how did you do in terms of your DFS game?
Yeah, I had a pretty good day overall. Missed a little bit of upside on Gibbs not getting in the end zone. His fantasy score for how productive he was about as low as you could possibly go. So we missed a little there, but fortunately hitting on Keenan Allen and Sam Laporta, just 4 touchdowns between the two, really, really allowed them to separate. And then we've talked about this over the, really the last couple years, Sia. Don't be afraid on some of the smaller slates and specific slates to play 2 tight ends. We've talked about it with Meg as well with Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith is approaching wide receiver territory. He's not necessarily just a blanket tight end. So just having the build that I had like yesterday with Keenan Allen, Sam Laporta, and Jonnu Smith essentially in all those lineups definitely made it hard to miss if you had either Tua or Caleb Williams or the Cowboys D.
Yeah, Meg, Jonnu Smith, just doing Jonnu Smith things. You got to love it. Alan,
he's my guy.
Yeah, he totally is. Alan Presig says, happy Friday, everyone. Love what you do to help us win our slates. And Greg Gousset says, cashed on all my contests but one yesterday. I do think, with the exception of me, right? I was good too, except I was so locked in on Rome Odunze. I was so blinded by his potential ceiling that that kind of held me back a little bit. I cashed in some contests. It wasn't the greatest day, but Mike, you and Meg gave out some absolute heaters, and I gave out some good plays too. But again, not enough Keenan Allen and DJ Moore for me ultimately, and not enough Cowboys defense. I switched on. This is one of those tinker things. If you are locked in on a play, whether it's a defense or not, and you change it up because you want to fit somebody in, I'm telling you, that usually doesn't work out. Go with the strong play that you thought was strong at the beginning. All right, let's get started with this. We got 10 games to roll through. We're not going to spend as much time on each game like we did for the Thanksgiving slate since we have the 10. Pittsburgh, Cincinnati. This one's in Cincinnati. Cincinnati favored by 3. It's a 47.5 point total. A lot of healthy totals. This one, the next one is 47.5. That's Chargers Falcons. I really like that one. But Meg, I'm going to start with you. Do you like anything in this Pittsburgh Cincinnati game? Again, it's a 47.5 point total. We got some big names like Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Chase Brown at 6,200. Obviously gets a lot of work. The other side, George Pickens, his price, creeping up a little bit there at 6,800. Interested in anything here?
Yeah, I know Pickens' price is coming up, but I still like him. I'm seeing him coming in at fairly low ownership. So I kind of like him as a more contrarian play here. We know how explosive the Bengals offense can be despite their record, but against the Steelers offense or defense, I don't know that I'm going to get to a ton of that. I actually really just like Pickens. They got to get these red zone woes going here. And they need to get George Pickens the ball more in the red zone. I'm hoping for that. And I'm targeting George Pickens as a likely contrarian play.
Yeah, and listen, their implied totals 22 or so, 22 and change, and so maybe it comes through the air. George Pickens makes sense against this Cincinnati back end. Mike, are you on George Pickens? It certainly is contrarian, and are you on anybody on the Cincinnati side?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because it feels like what we've seen from Cincy, if they're able to score here, it certainly feels like something from Pittsburgh is going to have some success here. On the initial runs, I'm not getting a ton of it. I am getting quite a bit of Cincinnati, though. I'm getting a lot of Chase Brown and a lot of T. Higgins. Some of that is price points. T. Higgins, 6,600 is kind of middling. Like we know in certain matchups, he plays closer to an 8K receiver. Chase Brown, though, the volume, I think is something that's going to be interesting here. At 6,200, I'm investigating a little more, but I'm getting a lot of it. And I know he's not super expensive, but we saw the Chargers game, 22 touches in the run game. He had 27 against Vegas. but it's the receiving volume, right? So over the last 2 games against Baltimore and the Chargers, now again, very different matchups here. He had 18 targets in the passing game in those 2 games, while having 35 rushing attempts in those. So like what you're talking about, someone who's touching the football 20 to 25 times. And some of these games looks like, a couple games with 30 touches, 6,200. Like if you're going to give someone the ball that often, you should be at least 7K. So despite the tough matchup, I've got a lot of Chase Brown here early.
And I would imagine he'd be pretty popular given that he's only 6,200, Mike. With that in mind, obviously, you can play him in tournaments as well, but would you consider him maybe a cash game lock at 6,200?
Yeah, as of right now, I would consider cash game lock. If the ownership I'm showing is correct, I'll probably be slightly underweight in tournaments. I'm showing him potentially as high as 40%, which again, it's pretty big number considering we have 10 games. When I run all the sims and everything there, it says he should be about 32, 33. So just a little over owned. Having said that, I think he's still a great play.
Meg, in or out on Chase Brown?
I could think out that ownership, actually. There's just other running backs I like more.
But you'd agree in cash games, certainly a consideration.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So let's move on to the next game. This one has a lot of my interest. The Chargers and the Falcons, another 47.5 point total. We got a really tight spread here with last I looked, Chargers favored by 1, but I mean, I think this thing could flip. It's the Falcons, if memory serves, coming off a bye here. A lot of heavy hitters here, Mike. We've got Bijan Robinson, who I love at 7,300. We got Drake London, who I also think is a really good contrarian play. We talked about T. Higgins in that sort of mid 6K price range. Drake London also sitting here in that mid 6K price range with a similar implied total. Darnell Mooney coming back from an injury. On the other side, Ladd McConkey keeps getting work. Gus Edwards, Kamani Vidal probably splitting work. Gus Edwards only 4,300. What do we like in this one?
I mean, I think you have to call it Justin Herbert initially. He looks fantastic, and the price point just hasn't moved. He's 5,600. Like he's a $7,000 quarterback right now. So Justin Herbert, someone I like here quite a bit. And the thing about Justin Herbert, we'll see. Will Dissly's questionable. I think he plays, but we'll see. You can play him naked at 5,600. I don't think you even have to force a stack here. So I think that is pretty fascinating. I like him. And if you're not playing him, or if you want to play it together, they are cheap enough. Gus Edwards. I mean, no Dobbins. Edwards obviously he's had an up and down career. Really, he when given the opportunity, I think he could definitely succeed. At 4,300, I think it's hard to ignore. So I think that for me, I'll either be playing Justin Herbert lineups, and then lineups that I'm not playing Justin Herbert, I'm probably just going to play Gus Edwards because it allows me to do essentially whatever I want the rest of the lineup. And it's a good, leverage off of Justin Herbert in the passing game. So have a lot of interest here. Love Herbert, love Gus Edwards.
Meg, any interest in playing Justin Herbert, maybe naked, and just correlating it with 1 or 2 players on the Atlanta side, like Justin Herbert and Bijan Robinson, or Justin Herbert and Drake London? Maybe your answer to that is no, but either way, are you stacking Justin Herbert? Or are you playing Justin Herbert?
I do have a lot of interest in stacking him with Ladd McConkey. Dissly, if he's healthy, would be in play. But I think, to Mike's point, and your point, you can play him naked. He's running a lot more. By the way, his rushing prop is always kind of live these last few weeks, so look out for that. But I definitely am fine playing him naked as well. One of my favorite stacks on the week, spoiler alert, is though Herbert to McConkey. But I do think you can play him naked as well, and I do like running it back with like a Bijan Robinson.
Any sort of redemption story for Quentin Johnston? We know he can get deep. He's only 5K. Meg, yes or no on Quentin Johnston?
I don't think I can do it again. I don't know. That was a painful watch.
Mike?
Yeah, I don't mind it. Definitely isn't something that pops really well for me. I think if you're, betting in certain betting markets and player props, I think it's probably more appropriate than DFS, but it wouldn't shock me at all if he has the big game.
Speaking of betting markets, I was just on the early edge. I put this out on Sportsline too. I'm going right back to it. It didn't win me any money last week. I'm going right back to Justin Herbert over 1.5 touchdown passes, just so everybody knows. I do think Justin Herbert's in for a good game. The running back going to take a step back without J.K. Dobbins. In my opinion, wasn't that effective in the first place. But let's move on. One more question though. Bijan Robinson, Meg, and then Mike, in or out?
In for me.
Mike?
Moderately in. Yeah, I so far it's really close. It's going to be close for me between Kamara and Bijan.
Speaking of Kamara and Bijan, if I'm looking at combo props, combo lines via the sports books, you got Saquon Barkley, combo meaning rushing and receiving. Saquon Barkley at around 111, 115, depending on where you look. Joe Mixon around 106, Alvin Kamara 105, Bijan Robinson 100. Those are the top four. And then it's Kyron Williams. And then Chase Brown is number 6 there. And that gives you an idea of what Chase Brown's value is, given that he's 6,200 and all those other running backs are in the much higher than that, in the 7K range and above. All right, let's move on to the Texans and the Jaguars. An interesting game. Jacksonville coming off a bye for whatever that's worth. Trevor Lawrence may play, although I don't know that that's been decided quite yet. I think he's been practicing on a limited basis. The Texans side, Meg, intrigues me a little bit. CJ Stroud down to $6,400. He's got Nico Collins. He's got Tank Dell. He's got Dalton Schultz, who is 3,300, which I just find interesting. Joe Mixon, a flat 8K. Are you interested in this Texan side? Or are you off this game altogether?
I am not interested in Stroud stacks as a stack, but I'm interested in Texans pieces. I do like, even though their price points are high, I will have both Joe Mixon and Nico Collins in the player pool. So definitely have interest there, but not interested in Stroud stacks.
Okay, Mike, any interest in the Texans side or the Jaguar side?
Nico for sure. Keep in mind when you box score watching, Nico's had touchdowns called back each of the last 2 games. So that's something to consider there. So one of the touchdowns was not only just a normal touchdown, it was a 15-point play in terms of DFS because of the 100-yard bonus, because of the reception, because of the touchdown. So like that, it's a big thing on a PPR site and the site like DK that gives the 100-yard bonus. Yeah, so like you should have seen a 35-point box score from Nico. So I like him a lot. Not getting anything else, it looks like, in this game.
Okay. I don't know that I'm interested in much in this game. I mean, I do agree on the Nico Collins standpoint. And I think if you're stacking CJ Stroud, I think a potential double stack is in order with Nico and Tank Dell. I think that's an interesting way to play this one. Meg, go ahead.
On the other side, though, if Lawrence plays, I do like Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah, it's maybe a good spot to go right back to him. He's only 5,500. Totally get that. All right, let's go to Seattle and the Jets. I'll just put it out there that I like Seattle money line in this one, which seems like a super obvious play. So maybe it doesn't hit, but that's a bet I already put in. Seattle money line earlier in the week. Jets, let's see. Are they coming off a bye? Yeah, they're coming off a bye. Seattle has to travel from the West Coast to the East Coast for a 1:00 game. So a couple things not going for Seattle, but the defense really starting to look good. Offense is always going to be hit or miss. I just think, Meg, these Jets are just so hapless. Like, I just don't, hapless, hopeless, whatever word you want to use. I don't see myself going to Garrett Wilson or Devontae Adams or even Breece Hall at 7,500. What say you? Are you out on the Jets or are you out on this game?
Kind of out on this game. Yeah, I was watching injury reports earlier, and if Breece Hall was out, obviously I would have had interest in Braylon Allen, but it looks like I believe he practiced yesterday. So not really any interest here.
Mike, we do have some heavy hitters on the Seattle side. Kenneth Walker, 7K. DK Metcalf, 6,400. JSN, 6,300. Geno Smith, only 5,500. But I don't know. It's only a 42-point total. This isn't a sexy game at all. What say you?
Yeah, no real interest here. Like, if you want to stack Geno in like 150 max kind of deals, then sure. I think it's fine. Maybe he's got a little revenge on the mind headed back to the New York Jets. I don't know. But overall, I think the only interest here would be Breece Hall's and Braylon Allen's situation. If Breece somehow doesn't play, then Braylon Allen, obviously, you're going to want to jam him in at 5K. But outside of that, they play with such a slow pace, just outdoor game, just not a real interesting spot here.
Let me ask you this. Let's just assume Gus Edwards is the starter for the Chargers. And it's not like we don't hear news that Kamani Vidal is going to split carries or something like that. Between Gus Edwards at 4,300, and this is really just, I'm just more curious because I don't think this is going to happen. But if Breece Hall is not playing and we know J.K. Dobbins isn't playing, between Braylon Allen at 5K and Gus Edwards at 4,300, Meg, I'll start with you. Which one of those two, maybe you don't play either, but which one of those two would you prefer?
Probably Braylon Allen because I don't want to do so many Herbert stacks, but I do like Gus. Go with Gus best too. But yeah, I'll say Braylon Allen.
Mike?
Yeah, it would be Braylon Allen pretty comfortably for me. He would be heavily involved in the passing game. Like the gap between Braylon Allen and Breece Hall is very small.
Interesting. All right. Love to see that. Every time you say something like that, I'm reminded. I know I said this on a show a couple of shows ago, but when you said that Noah Gray was, from a talent standpoint, was kind of Travis Kelce-ish, and when you said that, it was a very unpopular opinion. Now Noah Gray is just all over the field, catching everything. Probably going to get another touchdown and a handful of yards today at 3:00 when those two teams, when they played the Raiders. All right, we got to get to. This next game's really interesting. It's the Cardinals and the Vikings, but before we get there, let's hear a message from our partners.
Welcome to JJ's.
I'll have a... Wait, there's no way I can get a burger?
No chance, but you can have the NFL on CBS streams live on Paramount+. Oh, hang on. There's a toy.
Before we get to this Cardinals-Vikings game, I probably did a little bit of a disservice to Joe Mixon when we were talking Texans-Jags. Obviously, we know the volume he gets. He had a down game last week. But is Joe Mixon in the player pool? Meg, you get us started.
Yes, he's definitely in the player pool for me.
And Mike?
Not currently, but it really depends on how value shakes up. So I am going to prefer a guy like Alvin Kamara over Mixon just because of the passing game volume.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it really depends on where value shakes up. Like he definitely comes in the player pool. For some perspective, I'm getting him around 12% when I build lots of lineups. His ownership's coming in around 21, 22%. And then like a guy like Kamara, his ownership's coming in around 21%, about the same, but I'm getting him around 38% when I build. So it's showing me that I should be on the Kamara side a little heavier.
Okay, we'll get to that game soon. A lot of interesting pieces in that game, in my opinion. But let's go to Arizona and Minnesota. This one's interesting. I mean, we've got a dome environment, which I do think we need to consider, given not just that, like, that's good for DFS purposes, but also I think it's good for the Arizona Cardinals, and Kyler Murray. So I do think that's something to factor in here. I don't know, though, Mike, that I'm getting to really anyone in this game. It's a 45-point total. Cardinals 3.5-point dogs. I think you can play Kyler Murray with Trey McBride. I think you can throw in Marvin Harrison. James Conner, been a little flat lately. The Vikings side, interesting with Justin Jefferson and Sam Darnold. That looks to be a potential popular stack. So, Mike, I want to start there. Are you in on the Sam Darnold experience? And if so, how would you be playing it?
I could be in. I think the real thing that's fascinating with Darnold, like you definitely need the touchdowns, right? He's not going to give you much rushing upside. The question is are you willing to pay more for Sam Darnold than Justin Herbert this week, right? So if you are, I think you could be rewarded nicely. Like it's a good matchup. The way that I'm getting Darnold, like the computer wants me to play Darnold for sure, based off of where the ownership is, which I'm talking like 5%, and I'm getting him around 12%. So pretty strong position there. All of those lineups have Hawkinson only. It's just Darnold to Hawkinson and then load up everywhere else. So I'll give you an example of one of those. A Darnold to Hawkinson lineup also has Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley, David Moore, who I know you like, Mike Evans, some interesting pieces there. So you could do a lot when you just pair it with Hawkinson and Darnold, but you could say the same thing about a Herbert lineup. So I get it's going to be a difficult click, but because of that, I think he's going to be extremely low owned.
Side note, I don't want to forget to say this because I'm going to be on the prop show at 1:00 with Dave Richard, Prop Stars, and Eric Cohen. I think Mike, we'll get to this, but I just don't want to forget to say it. Mike Evans receiving yards prop. I understand he's coming off an injury and we're not 100% sure he's under 100% with his hamstring. His receiving yards prop's only 56.5. I'm just saying I kind of like the over there. I think that's really low. I know they're going to run the ball a lot. We're going to see a lot of Bucky Irving and all of that. Probably Chuba Hubbard on the other side. David Moore, we'll talk about him. His prop is only like low 30s or something, coming off 10 targets last game. Just some things to consider. Meg, anything that you like in this game? I think the Sam Darnold to TJ Hawkinson thing is really interesting. Certainly a money saver. I think it would be also interesting to just throw in Justin Jefferson there and then hope this game completely shoots out. Maybe you have a bring back, maybe you don't. I don't think you have to force it, but Trey McBride would make sense in that case. Your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I don't have a ton of interest on the Cardinals side. On the Vikings side, I do agree that the Darnold stack, because it could be pretty contrarian, of Darnold, Jefferson, Hawkinson, Darnold, Hawkinson, however you want to approach it, is interesting. I do like that. And then I kind of like Hawkinson as just a standalone piece as well. We saw 2 out of the last 3 games, 9 targets. He seems back. He was a hero for me in the prop market and a tight end parlay. So no, I like Hawkinson this week too.
I seem to recall you hitting. Did you hit an anytime touchdown parlay or something like that?
No, I hit 2. Last Sunday, I hit 2 different tight end parlays. I just brought National Tight Ends Day right back.
I'm just curious, like, what was the pay? Like, what was it like? Plus 1,000 or?
It was I got like a 23-1 and a 25-1 or something like that. I pushed Schoonmaker, Hawkinson, and Jonnu. I think it was Jonnu. I believe.
You need to like write him some sort of thank you card.
I do.
Maybe he needs to write you a thank you card. Maybe the karma's coming from you. We got a really important question in the chat from Beans. He says, turkey or ham? PPR. Meg, I'm starting with you.
Turkey.
Mike?
Filet. Yeah, I just throw some steaks on the grill. Like we're not messing around with either one of those. I had steaks yesterday.
Good answer.
Super
Good answer.
contrarian.
Yeah.
Super contrarian. I'm going to go with turkey there. Okay, I think we're done with that game. I'm trying to think. Okay, Aaron Jones, I'm guessing would be slightly contrarian, even though his price is right at 6,500. He had such a nice game last week, but he's been relatively flat. I mean, as a contrarian piece in a tournament, Meg, would you consider Aaron Jones at 6,500?
As a contrarian piece, I do find that interesting. Yes.
Yeah. How about you, Mike?
Yeah. I think the problem for me is just the middling kind of ownership. Like I don't think that he's going to be single digits. He's not going to be 20%, but the scenario to me where he's just like burying you at 6,500 is super low.
Totally agree with that. Okay.
Low.
And let me ask you one more thing, because Trey McBride sort of fits into this Jonnu Smith category or Brock Bowers of quote, air quotes, tight ends that are actually receivers. Does he, I got to think, Mike, he's in your player pool here.
He's in the player pool. I'm definitely projecting him as slightly over-owned. I think the problem, and the only way I could get there would be a double tight end. I could definitely play Hawkinson and McBride together, or McBride and someone like Taysom Hill, who we're going to talk about in a little bit. Yeah, in the player pool, but not getting as much as I thought I was going to.
And
really
Meg,
price point.
Go ahead. Meg, last thing on this game, James Conner is 6,600. Been a little flat, but we know he's prone to having some big games in or out on James Conner.
Yeah, we do know he's prone to having some big games. Unfortunately, I don't really have him in the player pool at this point.
Yeah, I don't either, unfortunately. I almost think he kind of qualifies, and I could be wrong, in that Aaron Jones conversation where the likelihood that he sinks you, I think, is relatively low. So let's move on to the Colts and the Patriots. Interesting one in the sense that a lot of people want to play Anthony Richardson. He was that guy last week for a lot of people, and he didn't really come through, which, again, shouldn't surprise anybody. We play Anthony Richardson in DFS because his ceiling is so high, but we acknowledge going into it that his floor is so low. Curious, Meg, I'll start with you. There's a lot of really reasonably priced quarterbacks. We talked about guys like Justin Herbert. There's some like real quarterbacks in the mid 5K range. Well, Anthony Richardson he's in the mid 5K range. I hesitate to call him a real quarterback at this point in his career. Would you take the chance on Anthony Richardson this week? I'm
not this week. I just like the other quarterbacks more. So I'm out on Richardson, unfortunately. And this is only a 42.5 point total, Meg. I assume, Ramondre was terrible last week. He shared a lot with Antonio Gibson. You got to choose between the receivers, DeMario and Kayshawn and Bourne. I just feel like if you're not in on Richardson, you're out on this game altogether, right, Meg? Not totally, just because the injury report looked, I believe Downs likely is not going to play. I don't believe he has been practicing. So just pay attention to the Colts injury reports. Alec Pierce is also one to watch. Is he playing? Is he not? That puts Adonai Mitchell in play, I think, either way, whether Pierce plays or not, because I believe his price is, 3.9K. So Adonai Mitchell is in play for me. And then I guess see if Alec Pierce is playing as well. So pay attention to the Colts injury reports as we go here. Absolutely great call. Mike, your thoughts on this game? Yeah, you got to watch the injury report for sure. Richardson's fine. I think that the ownership will finally come down a little bit here, which puts him in play because of the upside that he represents. I'm not in love with the play, but I definitely don't mind it.
and Jonathan Taylor. I assume we're out on Jonathan Taylor this week.
I don't mind Taylor either. Just at that price point, it's kind of like the James Conner situation a little bit. They're going to be about the same ownership. I think Taylor still has a lot of upside, but I still don't think we see many scenarios where he's like drastically outscoring Kamara or Saquon or anyone like that. So probably out.
We need one of those vintage JT games where he piles up a couple touchdowns and breaks one. We just haven't seen a lot of that. Meg, anything else to offer for this game? I love what you said about monitoring the receivers. It's Friday morning. We have to see, because obviously like an Anthony Richards stack to like an Adonai Mitchell, if some of these receivers are hurt, certainly makes sense. But Jonathan Taylor specifically, in or out on him, Meg?
I think I'm out on him, actually.
Okay. All right. Well, a lot of people, Meg, are out on the Commanders, and that's the game we're going to next. The Titans are at the Commanders. I don't see, just on its surface, I don't see a lot of appeal from a DFS standpoint here, other than, it's so interesting because the backup running backs are probably in play here, like a Jeremy McNichols, but it's not like he's 4K. He's 5,400. So
right.
Everybody kind of knew the injuries going into setting up the slate here. We'll see about Chris Rodriguez, but I don't really like anything on the Washington side, Meg. I mean, Noah Brown's always interesting at 4,400. I don't know that he's going to continue to see this many targets. And I don't really like anything on the other side, but your boy Calvin Ridley is there. Pollard's been having a good season. Any thoughts?
Yeah. First of all, wish we could play Terry, but the way they're using him is so beyond frustrating. So I've gone full circle with Cliff Kingsbury, where I was frustrated. Then I went on an apology tour and now I'm frustrated again. Use Terry McLaurin better. So can't go there, unfortunately. Looks like Brian Robinson practice limited. So yeah, I don't think we're going to, and like you said, there's really not the running back value. So I'll stay on the Titans side, unfortunately for us as fans. And yeah, it's Ridley and Pollard. We know you can run all over Washington. And so, Pollard's in play, like you said, having a great season, and the target share and the downfield targets that Ridley has gotten since Hopkins departed is just, and it's still the price point's great for me. So I have a lot of interest in both Pollard and Ridley.
Mike, Calvin Ridley, especially against this Washington back end, he does seem like the type of guy that could break the slate. That I don't want to say could come out of nowhere because people are kind of on to the Calvin Ridley experience, but I do like him in tournaments at 5,700, and I don't know that I've ever actually said that. I mean, I've heard Meg talk about him. I've never gotten there with Calvin Ridley. Your thoughts on him, and is there anybody in this game that you'd like to play?
Probably not going to get too much here, but I will say Ridley does project well, as does Tony Pollard. I think they're fine standalone plays. Pollard's ownership's pretty low here, and yeah, they've given him the ball quite a bit. The one that I would say, honestly, it's not crazy, is Will Levis. If he doesn't turn the football over, which he's essentially had a turnover every game. I mean, even his last 3 games, 18, 16.6, 19.1. At 5K, I think there's a path to Will Levis if he plays well and hits with Ridley, because you kind of know where the volume's going. It wouldn't shock me if you get a 25-point game out of Will Levis at some point here. Yeah,
very interesting. I might throw Calvin Ridley, probably without Will Levis, but I might throw Calvin Ridley in some of my tournament lineups for sure. I mean, listen, the Titans tried to give that game away several different times against the Texans last week and still managed to win. So I think this team is a little bit better than people think. Just something to point out there. All right, we got to get to the 3-game 4:00 slate. Again, kind of mirrors what we just did for Thanksgiving, except the games aren't far apart from each other, meaning that you can't really do the late swap stuff if that's what you were doing yesterday. But again, another 3-game slate. I'm very interested in some really interesting games. We're going to hear all about it right after this message from our partners.
CBS Sports HQ, giving you college football coverage unlike anyone else.
We're talking Big Ten.
Pre- and post-game coverage.
Are you encouraged with the way that this team responded?
Along with breaking news.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
Highlights and expert analysis.
That streak could be in jeopardy here.
Sure. What was your main takeaway from this game? How impressive was his domination?
That really changed the football game.
Let's go ahead and have some more fun.
Another wild ending.
The chaos continues.
Turn to CBS Sports HQ.
We're back on Fantasy Football Today, DFS. These 4:00 games, I just think, are so interesting. And maybe the most interesting one is this Rams-Saints game. It's a 49.5-point total. Rams favored by 2.5. Mike, I'll start with you. You mentioned Taysom Hill. I don't know how you get away from him at the tight end position at 5K just because of his upside and his potential and the fact that he gets to play the Rams in a relatively high-scoring game. Start there and then let us know what other Saints you might like.
Yeah, I love this game. Love both sides of the game. Love Kamara. Love Taysom Hill. Going to be playing both of them pretty heavily here, and we'll play them together. I know it sounds a little crazy, but I'm not expecting big passing game work from them. I think that playing Taysom and Kamara, you're getting a lot of the dump offs to Kamara. You're getting a ton of the rushing touchdown equity. So I like playing both of them together, and I love the other side of the game for sure.
Yeah, Meg, I'm gonna have you hit up the other side of the game. Before you do, though, there's some questions. So I forgot to set up because it's 2 contests this week, right? I forgot to set up the second contest for the actual main slate, so that's on me. I'm gonna set it up right after the show ends, which means Nada's going to have it to put into maybe the YouTube description, but more importantly, perhaps for everybody listening out there, the podcast description. I'll also tweet it out. So yes, there absolutely will be a contest. And it'll be ready to go, and probably I'll have it tweeted out within the next 45 minutes or so. So hang on for that. Appreciate everybody asking. Meg, the Rams side, Kyron Williams interesting at 7,200. But I'm personally not going to get there with him. But Puka Nacua at 7,600, I absolutely love. I like him better than Cooper Kupp at 7,400. So for me, I like what Mike said about the Saints, and I like running it back with Puka Nacua. What do you like on that Rams side?
Yeah, absolutely. Puka would be the main target from the Rams side. And while we don't get anything from Stafford's legs, if you get a 3 touchdown game, obviously he would certainly be in play if you wanted to do a Stafford Puka or Stafford double stack. So, but I agree with you. I do like Puka more than Kupp at almost the same price.
And Mike, is this, because you mentioned Alvin Kamara and Taysom Hill together, is this the type of game where you would take those 2 pieces and maybe even run it back with Puka Nacua, but not play a quarterback?
Definitely. And I will have Stafford to Nacua with Taysom and Kamara. Very much all in on this game.
Okay. And if you do that Stafford Nacua stack, it would just be those 2?
Yeah, that'd be the primary. I also have a little bit of interest in Demarcus Robinson. I have a little bit of interest in Kyron. I will have Rams onslaughts. I think they score 35 in this game.
So interesting. And again, if you're interested in playing just the afternoon slate, well, it makes it easier to do that. Of course, more people will be doing that on the afternoon slate, right? But it at least makes it easier to commit to that decision for an onslaught on the Rams side if you're just playing the 3 games. But I got to tell you all, I like this Tampa Carolina game. I like that Bryce Young is 4,700. I like that Xavier Legette, Adam Thielen, David Moore are all really cheap. And the cheapest of them all is David Moore. And he's coming off not just one great game, but like he's on the field a ton. Ever since Jalen Coker's been out, it's been the David Moore show. Thielen had an impact last week, but didn't get a lot of targets. Xavier Legette, his target share kind of rising a little bit. Meg, I'm going to start with you. Am I crazy to love Bryce Young at 4,700 to David Moore at 3,500, and then I can just kind of do whatever I want?
No, I don't think that's crazy. We've kind of come full circle with Bryce Young here too. So no, I think that's a great value savings here. And I have a lot of interest in this game too. So I'm kind of right there with you.
I'll stick with you, Meg, on the other side of the ball, though, because we've got a 5.5 point spread. Buccaneers favored going into Carolina, 46.5 point total. Bucky Irving is 5,800. So I think he's really interesting because everybody should want to play him. But we still see Rachaad White, and we still see a little bit of Sean Tucker. And we know that, the passing game is there with Baker Mayfield. I think the good news for Bucky Irving is he's enjoying the passing game as much as he is the running game. Are you in or out on Bucky Irving, Meg?
Definitely. And he's in my shell lineup. I really like Bucky Irving a lot, but I'm also very interested in the Baker to Mike Evans stack as well. That's one of my other quarterback stacks that I do really like this week.
Mike, we've talked a lot about quarterbacks that we like on this show. Is Baker going to sneak in as maybe a top 5 candidate, or are you just out on that? And your thoughts on Mike Evans?
Yeah, I'm not going to sneak Baker in. Mike Evans is fine on his own. Bucky Irving is obviously fine. I love Bucky Irving in this spot. He's way too cheap. At 5,800, we saw a glimpse of the upside in the last matchup in terms of the receiving game. And just what he can do when they get the ball in space. I think Tampa has always known that, but I think that'll be another massive wake-up call for them where they're just going to continue to let him work in that passing game. So I think he's just, again, way, way, way too cheap. And I'm only showing him around 10 to 12% ownership right now, but I would not be shocked if that steams to 15 or 20. There's some context there. The computer says I should be playing him 32% of the time. So
wow.
The computer wants it 3x where his current ownership is.
And in spite of the fact that he does share work with some of those other guys, would he be another, at his price, and we talked about Chase Brown in this context too, would he be another cash game guy for you?
For me, he would be, yeah. I mean, I think the concern with Bucky is always going to be the touchdown equity, right? Like he actually got tackled twice at the 1 in that game. He could have literally had a 40-point game in the last game. Sean Tucker got that 1 rushing attempt from the 1-yard line instead of Bucky Irving. And just another one in a pass that he got tackled inside the 1 or 2. So yeah, love him. The concern is certainly touchdown equity if he doesn't score from 5, 6, 7, or 10 yards out. But yeah, love him.
Okay, so when I asked Meg about the Bryce Young, David Moore stack, she was very nice. She was very kind. She didn't say, you're an idiot. But I give you the floor to call me an idiot. I mean, listen, here's the problem with this stack. The only problem with this stack, in my opinion, is that there are so many other great quarterbacks that are only like $700-800 more than Bryce Young, which isn't that big of a gap when you're talking about like the Justin Herberts or Anthony Richardsons of the world and others that we talked about. But I kind of like the David Moore side of this too, because we're getting like Kayshon Boutte pricing for a guy that we know is going to get targets at 3,500. Your thoughts on the stack, Mike?
I don't love the stack. I love David Moore. I think Moore is a fine way to play it. I think it's low risk. With Bryce, Bryce has played good real life football the last few weeks. Against Kansas City, like he played really good real life football. He scored 16.5 fantasy points. Not going to get it done in a big way. 12 points against the Giants, 10.7 against the Saints, who have been awful defensively. So for me personally, until I see it, like at 4,700, are you going to be happy with 20 points? Yeah, probably. Is there really the outcome where Bryce Young's scoring 30? That's the question to me. I don't think so because of the way they use Chuba Hubbard and other, the running backs in the goal line situations. So for me, I think it's really unlikely that Bryce Young scores enough to where you need him to be your quarterback, right? That's the only thing that I have a problem with. And I think that there's a lot of downside. I think there's a 8 to 10 point downside that just doesn't exist with someone like Justin Herbert. So personally, it could definitely work. It could definitely get there, but I'm going to just play the cheap pass catcher and move on.
Yeah, that makes sense to take the David Moore piece and move on. Well, we're going to get to our cheat sheets in actually just a few minutes where perhaps I might be featuring this very stack. And of course, we're going to have Mike's top 3 at each position, which I know everybody always loves to hear. But first, we got one more game to cover. It's a big one. So these 425 games, or I should say 405 and 425 games, are super interesting, not just from a football standpoint, but from a DFS standpoint. It's the Eagles +3 at the Ravens, 50.5 point total. Lamar Jackson, 8K. Derrick Henry, 7,800. This is an expensive game when you're talking about some of these heavy hitters, including Saquon Barkley at 8,500, AJ Brown at 8,300. Mike, I start with you. Because of the price and because of like the good pricing in most of the other games, do you end up getting to this game?
I really don't. Not a lot. I think that, Saquon's obviously been phenomenal. If you want to play him, I think it's okay. The pieces that pop up when I run the numbers here that I get a little bit of, just standalones, definitely not stacking. Zay Flowers and Dallas Goedert. Both of those two in the passing game going to go a little overlooked. We're talking single digits on Zay Flowers against a team that probably is going to score on them. So they're probably neutral or trailing at some point. So I got a little interest there. And Dallas Goedert, just 4,300. I think he's going to be like 3% owned or less.
Meg, as much as I think that like a guy like Jalen Hurts or even Lamar, but let's just say Jalen Hurts can break this slate or even the afternoon slate, if you will, with like a AJ Brown or Devontae Smith or even a Dallas Goedert. Like, and I know I just left out Barkley there, but like I don't think I can get there, especially considering I'm not 100% sure this Ravens defense in the back end is as bad as we thought. Like maybe they're actually getting better altogether, but also with the secondary as well. And we know the Eagles defense is pretty formidable too. Like, I don't know. I mean, I almost lean to the under here. Not that I'm going to bet that necessarily, but with the pricing considered, I don't think I get anywhere here. How about you?
Yeah, this game is just so interesting because of these defenses, right? But there's all these stars, and there's no way you really are going to have to select if you do want to play players from this game, only a piece or two, because they are so expensive. But we are seeing very low ownership. I do have some interest if you want to go contrarian, either Barkley or AJ Brown. I have more interest in AJ Brown in attacking that Ravens secondary, even though Barkley has just been phenomenal and so fun to watch. For me, the piece I'm most interested is a contrarian AJ Brown, and then just move on.
I 100% agree. I mean, I think Devontae Smith's price is going to be appealing. This assumes he's healthy because he's only 5,800. But I 100% agree that if, in my opinion, if somebody is going to break the slate for you in a tournament lineup, it's going to be AJ Brown. And I'm including both teams here. I think that's the piece. If you're like, I might throw him into a lineup or two reluctantly, but it's just because of what you just said. Like he could have, 2 touchdowns in 127 yards, whatever it is. Mike, any final thoughts on this game before we get to our cheat sheets?
I would consider stacking it up overall if you're playing a lot of entries. Just the price points become pretty prohibitive. So that's mostly the reason why I won't be playing a lot of it.
Okay, so let's move on to price points that are not quite as prohibitive. Meg, we go to your cheat sheet, and we go to a guy that I just said I bet is over 1.5 touchdowns. I'll point out that his passing yardage prop, and I know I haven't said the name yet, his passing yardage prop is 247.5, and that's up there. I mean, it's inside the top, looks like inside the top 6, which is saying something. Talk to me about your stack.
And what's his rushing prop? Because that's one to keep an eye on too. He got there. That's another one. It's Justin Herbert, and I agree with you on being interested in the prop market. But I'm interested here in DFS as well. I like Justin Herbert to Ladd McConkey. Please just target Ladd McConkey more and not QJ. So that's my favorite stack. And then in that same game, chalk buy for me is Bijan Robinson. Like that, Atlanta needs to win here. Tampa is going to come on their heels. So I think they're going to lean heavily on Bijan. And then chalk fade for me. Love Chuba Hubbard, but just in this game and at his price point, and if he's coming at higher ownership, just like other running backs more. So Chuba Hubbard is the chalk fade for me. Just talked about this. My contrarian play is AJ Brown. I'm seeing pretty low ownership for a guy who, like you guys said, could break the slate. And then my value is just watch the Colts injury report and considering Adonai Mitchell, especially if Alec Pierce is ruled out as well.
Love all of that. My cheat sheet is as follows. By the way, Justin Herbert's rushing prop is 20.5 yards. Interesting rushing prop there. Probably take the over there. Although in that particular game, Falcons don't have much of a pass rush. So I don't know that he's going to feel like he needs to escape the pocket a lot. But and I say that almost, I'm talking like betting too, but I think that is all the more reason to like him from a DFS standpoint, because I think he's going to be able to sit back, and as long as the receivers actually catch the ball, like he should be able to pick apart this defense. We'll see. I've been wrong before. My stack Bryce Young to David Moore. I think the key piece I left off about that, I mean, I've talked about the price and all that. One thing we know about Tampa is you can expose their defense. I will say this though, one thing to be careful with, their secondary has gotten some pieces back. So, there is something to be said for maybe this secondary isn't quite as bad as it looked earlier in the season. Either way, that's still going to be my stack. I am also going to take Mike's advice and just play one of those Carolina receivers and get out, most likely David Moore, since he's only 3,500. My chalk buy, Bijan Robinson at 7,300. Chalk fade, Kyron Williams at 7,200. Can't play all the running backs. I want to play Bijan. I want to play Kamara. I want to play Chase Brown. I can't just play everybody. So I'm fading Kyron Williams. My contrarian play, like the AJ Brown call, I'll go with something a little bit more cost-effective in Drake London, who I believe is 6,500 or 6,600. And then my value play, not super value here. It's $5K, but it's Taysom Hill. I can't give up on this upside. I think, like Mike said, Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara could both have great games. Mike, top 3 at each position. We start at quarterback.
Number 1, Matthew Stafford. I know it's interesting to have number 1 without some rushing upside, but again, I think this Rams team puts up 35 points in this game. I think we get a minimum of 4 offensive touchdowns here, which is going to be significant. Justin Herbert, number 2, it's the price point. It's the rushing upside, the controlled environment. I think it's a good spot for him. And then number 3, I've actually listed CJ Stroud here. I think this Texans game against the Jaguars could be a sneaky shootout. We just got news that Trevor Lawrence is going to start for the Jaguars here. I think that helps push a lot. And I just love the upside of stacking with Nico Collins and CJ Stroud. Look, this team, they're fortunate they're in the division that they're in because they've fallen apart a bit. But to me, this projects as a good get right spot. I think they play really well.
All right. Top running backs.
Alvin Kamara, number 1 for me right now. Chase Brown and Bucky Irving, number 2. I would get number 2 and 3. You could also list Gus Edwards if you need the price point. So I'm going to play a lot of those 4 total, but to me, Kamara is going to be number 1, mostly because of the stackability in that game on the other side of the Rams.
Okay. Wide receiver.
Puka Nacua, number 1. Love Puka here. I think that this Saints defense is going to struggle tackling this man in space. He's going to get targeted. He's going to have big plays. Bet his longest reception over. Bet him to find the end zone. Love Puka Nacua here. Nico Collins, number 2. Again, touchdowns called back in each of the last 2 weeks. They really need to keep winning football games here. And having Trevor Lawrence in on the other side, I think keeps this one competitive enough. And then number 3, you need salary if you're going to play Nacua, Collins, and Kamara. Give me David Moore. Too cheap and should be some opportunity there.
I like Moore and Nacua receiving yards overs, everyone. Just FYI. Again, I'll be on the prop show at 1 o'clock. We'll be talking about some of the players that Mike's talking about right now. Let's hear your top 3 tight ends.
TJ Hawkinson, Taysom Hill, and Zach Ertz. Ertz is the piece I think is interesting here. I think that this game's going to be competitive. Washington has fallen off of a cliff. The Titans are nowhere near as bad as their record. If Will Levis had just taken a knee on, they could have taken a knee on first down in like 3 of these games, and they probably win them. So this Titans team is far better, a lot like the Chicago Bears, frankly. They're just far better than the record indicates, and it's because of that defensive front. We know Jaden's not running as much, so he's going to hit Zach Ertz a little bit. So Hawkinson, Taysom Hill, Zach Ertz.
You just reminded me of how the Bears game ended yesterday. And I think even if you're like the most casual of football fans, or like you kind of like never watched football before, but you're watching the clock, and you would have been like, wait, something's wrong. Like, what are we doing here? I truly can't believe it. Anyway, but real quick, before we get out of here, let's spend 1 minute on this 3 o'clock Black Friday game. Mike, it's your Chiefs. They're laying 13 points. Are you building showdown lineups? And like, is there maybe a featured guy or a featured piece you're going to include in your lineups?
I am actually not playing this showdown slate. Little travel day for me as soon as we get done, but I'm not playing the showdown slate. I would say that the Chiefs are down to a 3rd string kicker, which makes it always interesting in DFS. We haven't seen a lot of Matthew Wright. He's not even available on one of the 2 sites. So it could be an interesting look there. Travis Kelce and Brock Bowers. I look forward to those 2 standing there with another jersey swap at the end. I think they're both going to get targeted. I think they're both going to have a great game overall, but I admittedly will not be playing this showdown slate.
All right. And Meg, I always have to ask you, this is how we close the show. They're laying 13 points at home against Aiden O'Connell and his crew. I know it's not an official pick. What would be your lean? Laying the 13 or the plus 13 for the Las Vegas Raiders?
I mean, I think Mike's team wins, but they haven't covered much this season, so I'm going to say I'll take the plus 13 with the Raiders here.
13's a lot.
That's a big number. It's a big number.
If Aiden O'Connell's thumb is actually healthy, he's a better quarterback than Gardner Minshew. And if he hadn't gotten injured 3-4 weeks ago, we probably would have seen that. So yeah, I'd probably take the points. Not any official plays. No official plays coming from us. Just some leans.
It's fun.
All right. Well, everybody, thanks for joining us. We had 2 shows today. We're going to have our contest link in all the descriptions, so don't worry there. I'm going to create it right after we end this show. On behalf of Meg Shop, on behalf of Mike McLaurin, on behalf of Nada and this entire Fantasy Football Today DFS crew, have a great weekend. I hope you had a happy Thanksgiving, and hopefully we'll see some green screens tweeted out on Sunday. See you next Thursday, folks.